Vote on Bernanke's confirmation expected to take place early next week. And for an instant audit on it this morning, Adam Connors joins us. Adam is Director of Corporate Finance at CK Cooper in Irvine, California. You really think Ben Bernanke's in trouble here in terms of getting confirmed, Adam?
You know, I don't actually. I really think this is just something that people are digging for, and it's been a kind of a mishap when it comes to logistics of getting him reappointed. You know, quite frankly, I think folks are going to look at, you know, we're not going to change horses in mid-financial crisis here, and you know, quite frankly, what everyone's doing is they're doing a look back to 2008. Well, you know, 2008, he'd only been, you know, he's been dovetailing off of what Greenspan has actually been working on, which Greenspan, you know, to this day is still making amends for the precarious situation that he feels partial responsibility for putting us in. And so, you know, no, Connell, I don't think it's going to be too far away from him continuing on his second term.
It's interesting how the numbers are shaping up. You have people certainly on the far left, like a Bernie Sanders, that are against him, but you also have, you know, people, a number of Republicans who have said they won't vote for him. So getting to the 60 might be a little bit of a challenge. You know, if you're Bernanke right now, anything you can do to maybe convince people that the job you're doing has been, you know, has been an effective one?
You know, quite candidly, I mean, he's probably going to have a little bit of PR time, I'd imagine. And so what he needs to do is just to say that what he has been saying and exactly what is going on is that the economy is in a precarious situation. However, we're taking the steps to ensure that we are getting it back on the right path. And, you know, I think what Buffett said about his abilities to execute and make the right decisions at crucial times, he did in fact do that. And I think that overall people do understand that. And the idea of literally changing mid-horse or changing horses mid-race here, I think that's going to shy away from everybody to make any big changes here.
All right, we'll see how they proceed with it. Adam, we'll have you for the hour, 2 o'clock in the morning out in Irvine, California. Always good to have Adam Connors up early with us. All right, now, from Ben Bernanke, we're going to talk now about Tim Geithner, who made an instant audit. Adam Connors is Director of Corporate Finance at CK Cooper. He's with us from out in California. And in London this morning, David Buick from BGC Partners is also joining us. I don't know, David, what's going on here? What's your view on, you know, whether these restrictions, this new regulation makes U.S. banks less competitive around the world?
Is it my show, Connell? Sorry, good morning.
Yep.
I just think that in the wake of what happened last week with the introduction of President Obama's thoughts on the banking sector, which I thought spread over a period of 10 years made a huge amount of sense, and we could digest it, the taxpayer could benefit, and also the banks wouldn't be too badly affected. But yesterday's interjection by the President of the United States, in my opinion, is too draconian. We are handling, as far as I'm concerned, a very dangerous situation. It's really the reenactment of the Glass-Steagall Act. And what also concerns me is that because banks are not going to be allowed to be big banks, and they're going to be pared down.
But before we go to Adam, David, what's wrong with bringing back Glass-Steagall? I mean, a lot of people would say, hey, that worked for, you know, 60 years.
For the simple reason that we're in recovery, Connell, and that's what worries me. When you're in recovery, you need every cylinder firing at the same time. If you're suddenly in the middle of where you are as the deepest possible recession, you split off your investment banks from your ordinary banks, and you say to the ordinary banks, well, okay, old fella, go and swim, and he's up against a tsunami-type tide. He's going to be very, very troubled in how he's going to make his money because he knows that unemployment is massive. He knows that industry and commerce is very fragile. Why should he lend his money unless he actually knows that on the other side of the coin, he's getting revenues from proprietary trading or from investment banking or from all kinds of other things? Now, what we're all concerned about, the whole world, is risk. But what I think is personally disgraceful is that the whole world's been talking absolute gobbledygook for 10 months now on regulation. And what have we got out of it? Zippo. Talk, talk, talk. Well, as the old bard said all those years ago, talkers are no good doers. What we need is each country to formulate its own regulatory policies. Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone so they can keep in touch with how they're doing so that there's no regulatory arbitrage. And had this happened, we wouldn't see everybody flailing around looking for answers without having clearly thought out what the ramifications are.
All right, Adam, so that's David's take on what's going on. One of the things that David also commented on in some of his writing recently has been that this is pretty much a surprise for these markets. The bank fee we had some warning on. This we sort of did as well, but it was rather unexpected in general for something else to fall on the financial shoulders. I mean, what is your take on this? How surprised were you, and how do you react to the news?
Yeah, I'm actually, I was actually quite surprised, as a matter of fact, and David actually hit on quite a few different things that make a whole lot of sense. You know, the idea of implementing these things as we're moving forward. I mean, the banks right now and these institutions are serving really two roles at this point. One is being the leaders out of this recession. I mean, these are as they are and being penalized for being some of the most profitable institutions and businesses right now that employ lots of people, as well as they're the ones that are supposed to be encouraged to start lending again and getting folks their mortgages and everything to that effect. And so it's it's interesting that we would be attacking them. It does make sense, I think, to create some type of silos, as well as protect certain monies that are used and acquired for certain things. However, those to be implemented not at this time when things are so precarious and so so close to the edge right now.
And it's interesting. We'll let David have the final word on this. At the end of the day, is it fair to say, with all the concerns, and I know the liquidity issues that Adam brought up was what I was hearing from a lot of Wall Street people yesterday, that if these measures were implemented, the system would be safer? And isn't that the goal here?
The system would be safer, Connell, if we had some sensible regulatory controls in place already. Without being repetitive, it's 10 months since we first started this animation, and nothing's actually happened at all.
Right.
My concern is not that I'm against regulation, far from it. What I want is quality regulation in place.
So what would that be?
I have such a high regard for the United States as I do for the UK. I don't want you surrendering your banking prowess to China, because that's what you guys are doing. But one thing I am very hopeful of, I don't think President Obama, with the greatest respect in the world, has got more than a 20% chance of getting this legislation through without some serious alterations.
So, David, talk to us a little bit about that. You say you're not necessarily against more regulation, and the markets really need it probably to function at optimum. So what would you want to see on the regulatory side? What do we need to see right now for these markets?
Basically, we need to see a higher degree of capital appropriation towards trading and towards bank lending. We're all expecting it. All the banks have been geared up for it for months. But the silence is absolutely deafening, Jenna. All we're hearing just talk, talk, talk. What I would like to see, to be honest with you, is regulatory controls put in the hands of the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the ECB, the Bank of Japan. That's only 4 phone calls. Could we please get on with it instead of waiting for Godot? This is just dissipating and trashing, or potentially trashing, the entire financial system, and as far as I'm personally concerned, it's quite unnecessary.
The idea of this coordinated regulation has been difficult to, I mean, it's one thing to talk about it, as David points out here, Adam, but to implement that worldwide is difficult. And that's why people are saying, well, if we put these in place, maybe U.S. banks are less competitive around the world. Is it realistic to talk about global regulation, everybody playing along on the same, playing by the same rules, essentially?
It's a tough one, and quite frankly, when I think about China trying to play ball, if you will, I mean, I just see them as just like we were dealing with some of the trade issues just a couple weeks ago when President Obama was touring the Asian markets and the Asian countries. Is that realistically, are they really going to want to play ball? I mean, do they want to? It'd be almost a sense, if I was China, I'd be thinking that maybe the U.S. is trying to hold me back, or they're trying to implement their views so they don't lose their footing within the global financial markets. And so I see that some of the emerging companies, they don't have their arms tied behind their back, and so there might be some pushback, and coordinating that orchestra might be a little tough.
So, David, on this, again, let's just go back to where do we go from here? So we've heard this Volcker rule. We're trying to understand it and get a grasp of what it's actually going to do. How do you think this plays out over the next 6 to 12 months?
What I think I'd like to see, Jenna, is a disappearance of the angst and hatred and resentment. And I'd like to see a little bit of eyeballing, because I can't believe that the quality people such as Jamie Dimon, Lloyd Blankfein, Brian Moynihan, and all these characters can't have a really good dialogue with Tim Geithner and come down to something that is socially acceptable. Right. There is a moral obligation to straighten this out. Of course the taxpayer deserves to have his money back, but to square up like medieval knights on horses with spears is just nonsense, and it just creates a very uncomfortable atmosphere, and it makes people dig their heels in when really we should be cracking on.
David Buick, if nothing else, proving yet again that if I had half the command of the English language that he has, that I might actually have a successful career. David, thanks for coming on. We love it. And Adam, good to see you as well. All right, is that true, Ashley? We head back over.